It began with a single bullet. A single act of violence that ignited a fire across the world. But the truth is, World War I didn't start because of one man or one event. It started because the world itself was already burning. The year was 1914. Europe stood at the peak of its power, with mighty empires stretching across continents. But beneath the surface, a storm was building. This was a war waiting to happen. War born from fear, pride, and greed. Before the war, Europe was divided into two great alliances. The Triple Alliance, consisting of Germany. These alliances were meant to protect peace, but in truth, they created a trap. A single spark could drag the entire continent into war. Every nation was preparing for conflict, building massive armies and stockpiling new, powerful weapons. Militarism became a symbol of national strength. Every country believed that its power was measured by the size of its guns and the strength of its navy. But behind the grand parades and patriotic speeches, fear was growing. Each empire watched the other, anxiously waiting for the moment to strike first. They believed that the best defense was a swift, overwhelming offense. This arms race created an atmosphere of intense paranoia, where diplomacy was overshadowed by military planning. The most dangerous place on Earth in 1914 was the Balkans, a region often called the powder keg of Europe. Here, ancient rivalries collided with modern imperial ambitions. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, once a dominant force, was struggling to hold together dozens of different ethnic groups, many of whom longed for independence. Meanwhile, the small nation of Serbia dreamed of uniting all Slavic peoples under its flag. It was a nation with big ambitions, and Austria-Hungary saw it as a direct threat to its own fragile empire. Tensions escalated dramatically after the Balkan Wars of 1912 and 1913, when Serbia expanded its territory and its national pride soared. This success fueled the dreams of Slavic nationalists living within Austria-Hungary's borders, who now looked to Serbia for leadership. The rulers in Vienna feared that this rise of Slavic nationalism would tear their empire apart from the inside. They were determined to crush Serbia's influence before it was too late. It was only a matter of time before something or someone lit the fuse. On June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, visited the city of Sarajevo in Bosnia. It was a territory that Austria had annexed just a few years earlier, much to the anger of neighboring Serbia. The visit was meant to be a show of imperial strength, a day of celebration. Instead, it became the day the world changed forever. A secret Serbian nationalist group called the Black Hand had plotted his assassination. They saw the Archduke as a symbol of Austrian oppression. Among the assassins was a 19-year-old student named Gavrilo Princip. He and his fellow conspirators positioned themselves along the Archduke's motorcade route, armed with bombs and pistols. An initial assassination attempt failed when a bomb bounced off the Archduke's car and exploded, injuring several bystanders. Shaken but determined to continue, Franz Ferdinand decided to visit the wounded in the hospital. But his driver took a wrong turn, and the car stalled right in front of a cafe where Gavrilo Princip happened to be standing. As the Archduke's car tried to reverse, Princip stepped forward and fired 2 shots. One hit the Archduke. The other hit his wife, Sophie. Both died within minutes. No one could have known that this single act, these 2 gunshots, would be the catalyst that would pull the entire world into war. Austria-Hungary, looking for an excuse to crush its rival, immediately blamed the Serbian government for the assassination. While Serbia denied any official involvement, the Austrians were not interested in the truth. On July 23, 1914, Austria sent Serbia a harsh ultimatum, a list of 10 impossible demands, designed to be rejected, thereby justifying a declaration of war. To the surprise of many, Serbia agreed to most of the demands, but not all of them. For Austria-Hungary, that was enough. On July 28, 1914, it declared war on Serbia. It was the first domino to fall. The complex web of alliances now snapped into action. Russia, seeing itself as the protector of the Slavic peoples, began to mobilize its massive army to support Serbia. Germany, allied with Austria, saw Russia's mobilization as a direct threat and declared war on Russia on August 1st. France, bound by treaty to Russia, entered the fight soon after. Germany's war plan required a rapid invasion of France, so it invaded neutral Belgium to bypass French defenses. This violation of Belgian neutrality outraged Britain, which then declared war on Germany on August 4th. Within 1 week, a regional conflict had exploded into a continent-wide war. It was a chain reaction that no one seemed able or willing to stop. History often blames the assassination at Sarajevo for starting the war. But the truth runs much deeper. World War I didn't happen because one man was killed. It happened because nations were trapped by decades of paranoia, ambition, and flawed logic. Militarism had convinced leaders that war was a noble and effective tool of policy. The intricate system of alliances turned small conflicts into global crises. Imperialism fueled a relentless competition for colonies, resources, and influence across the globe. And nationalism, the passionate belief that one's own country was superior and always in the right, made compromise seem like weakness. It wasn't one single mistake. It was the result of millions of decisions made by powerful men who foolishly believed that war would be quick, glorious, and decisive. They promised their people will be home by Christmas. As millions of young men marched happily to the front lines in the summer of 1914, they had no idea of the horror that awaited them. No one came home by Christmas. The war they expected to last for a few months dragged on for 4 brutal years. From 1914 to 1918, Europe became a graveyard. The Industrial Revolution had produced new, terrifying weapons. Machine guns that mowed down soldiers in waves, heavy artillery that turned landscapes into moonscapes, and poison gas that choked the life out of men in the trenches. The war turned into a stalemate of trench warfare, a nightmarish world of mud, barbed wire, and constant death. Over 16 million people died, soldiers and civilians alike. Entire generations were wiped out. For great empires that had dominated the world for centuries, the German, Russian, Ottoman, and Austro-Hungarian all collapsed into dust. The world that entered the war in 1914 was gone by 1918, shattered beyond recognition. And it was all because no one in power had the courage or wisdom to stop and ask, what are we really fighting for? On November 11th, 1918, at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, the guns on the Western Front finally fell silent. The Great War was over, but the peace that followed planted the seeds for an even greater conflict. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, was designed to punish Germany. It was forced to accept full blame for the war and pay crippling reparations, humiliating the nation and crippling its economy. The world wanted lasting peace, but instead, it built a peace based on revenge and resentment. Just 2 decades later, the fire that began in 1914 would burn again, this time even hotter, in the form of World War II. So, why did World War I really start? Because human beings forgot how fragile peace is. It wasn't destiny. It was a series of choices. Every empire that sought glory found only loss. Every leader who craved more power ended up losing everything. The Great War was supposed to be the war to end all wars, but its greatest lesson is how easily they can begin. We must remember the truth. Wars don't start with weapons. They start with ideas, with pride, fear, and hatred, and they only end when we choose to remember our shared humanity. The Great War began with 1 bullet and ended with millions of broken hearts. Thank you for watching. If you found this story meaningful, please like this video and subscribe for more untold stories from our world's past.